week. Pray you bless those as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, just so you know, there's J.B. Hickson from Not by Works Ministries, a good friend of mine. I've done in his podcast a number of times, is going to be with us on Tuesday night here at FBC at 7 o'clock. It will be live streamed if you want to catch that on our various live stream platforms. And then in a week, October 15th, I'm going to be through the FBC live stream stuff. I'll be hosting. It'll probably be streamed on some other channels like maybe Brit Gillette's End Times Bible Prophecy channel. We're going to do a prophecy roundtable with Brit Gillette, Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, and myself. And Tom Hughes was going to join us, but he's supposed to be in Israel, but we'll see if he lands there. And it's kind of a difficult time to go there, but people are going, but there are not many airlines going. That's part of the problem. So that's on October 15th at 7 p.m., a prophecy roundtable on AI technology. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that this week. I'm going to save some of my stuff that I've been collecting on that particular issue. I do have a couple things to say about it today if I get to it. But again, this is sort of this is the formula that I use for determining what's important and putting into the prophecy update. It can be a bit confusing. I've also said, I think I've used this before, I'm developing a wheel of prophecy, and I'll just take it for a spin and figure out what I'm going to talk about on a particular topic. I said when we went to the last conference, I said, well, maybe we should just do a wheel of prophecy and make the speakers speak on the topic that it lands on, because there are plenty of them, and there are plenty of them would take up the whole time. So we talk a lot here about acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding, based in part on this verse in Daniel that as we get closer to the time of the end, the wise will understand. And I think that we're really seeing a lot of issues come into focus that we just didn't pay that much attention to. And one of those issues, by the way, is Israel. I hope to talk a little bit about that at the end. But I've said this before, that the issue of Israel will be the most divisive issue in the church till the Lord returns. And I think that has a prophetic aspect to it. I was watching, I can't remember the name of the podcast. I hate to mention it anyway because I don't want you to go there and watch it. But they were saying that, Luther, when he went off on the Jews, as he did towards the end of life, he had it right. They're to be completely rejected. God's done with Israel. And Jesus, by the way, returned in 70 AD, which I find to be one of the most, I would believe the moon is made of green cheese before I believed that. So we'll talk about that. And I know I did a podcast with Olivier Melnick this week on Israel, Shalom and Messiah Ministries. You can catch that if you want. And I'm pretty sure the comment's been deleted by now. But it was one of the most vicious, ungodly comments I've ever seen about you guys. I doubt that you're Christians, that you would support Israel in any way. So, fine, have that opinion, because it was a vicious opinion, comment, and I think Olivier took it down, bless his heart. But there's just no call for that. So I've got a lot of clips today. Some of them are extended, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get through. Well, I could get through it, but if I didn't want to do stuff like, eat lunch or anything. So here we go. Okay, so most of this is going to focus on Israel today because that's a very big issue, but I do have some things to say about our current situation in the United States. So this is an article from Ynet, and I'll just read the summary of it. The earthquake in the Iranian axis and the option of a surprise from Syria. Imaginary things have been done. In Israel, it is estimated the ceasefire talks in Lebanon are frozen until the situation in Hezbollah is clarified. The expectation from the U.S., the deterrence of Tehran, how will the elimination of Nasrallah affect Saudi Arabia, and will Assad respond to the calls of the Emirates and break away from the axis of evil? The political analysis and the Iranian dilemma, it will take years to understand what we will do. There are hair-raising things. So that's just sort of a summary of the things that are going on in the Middle East. So Israel took out Nasrallah. This will come up, but this is sort of a little bit of a summary. So Israel had this amazing operation over the last couple of weeks, and it continues. Every day it continues. They did the pager attack, and then when they said, okay, we're going to go to walkie-talkies, then there was attack through the walkie-talkies. Then they said, okay, we'll have a meeting in person. They took out the entire leadership of the Al-Radwan Brigade, which was plotting an invasion of northern Israel through tunnels and to take over the Galilee. That's something that Hezbollah has planned for a very, very long time. We'll talk a little more about that. And now they continue to take out people. There was a guy who was appointed to succeed Nasrallah. By all indications he has joined his cousin. He was a cousin of Nasrallah's, and he has joined him in his martyrdom on the road to Jerusalem, as they talk about it. There's also an indication that the leader of the Quds force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was also killed in the same strike that took out the new Hezbollah leader in Beirut. And it's interesting because what happened was when Israel did all of these attacks, they said, okay, we can't communicate through our cell phones, our email, or anything like that. We have to have meetings in person. So now they're having meetings in person, but they are compromised. And so Israel knows exactly where they are. And Israel will go in and they will take, for example, in the bombing that took out Nasrallah, they dropped 83 tons of bombs on one building. And by the way, I thought that there wouldn't be a body for a funeral. I don't know if there's been a funeral yet. I did see videos of a body under a shroud, and under a flag being prepared for burial, spraying perfume and everything. And the video said it was Nasrallah's body, and I doubted whether that was true, but now Israel thinks that when Nasrallah was killed, that the explosion sucked all the oxygen out of the tunnels and basement or whatever it was that he was hiding in, and he suffocated. By the way, there's also some indication that the last thing he was doing before the bombs hit was watching Benjamin Netanyahu speak at the UN. So there seems to be a little bit of justice there. So Seth Frantzman the other day, and if I covered some of this last week, I apologize. I don't know that I did, but there's been this controversy about the U.S. pushing Israel to make a deal. You got to make a deal. You got to have peace. You got to get a ceasefire, get a ceasefire, get a ceasefire. Now, part of that is because whoever is president of the United States wants to protect the way for the election of the next president of the United States. I don't know who's in charge. Does anybody know who's in charge of this thing right now? Does anybody have any confidence of anybody that is of the people that are in charge? It's one of the most amazing things I've said. So here's a tweet from Seth Frantzman last Sunday. He's responding to this one, Lahav Harkov's tweet. I feel like not enough people are talking about how, under pressure from the Biden administration, former Prime Minister Lapid made a gas deal with the Lebanese government, of which Hezbollah was and still is a member, and they lauded it as some kind of major step towards peace. So what happened? So remember, there was this dispute between Israel and Lebanon over the Maritime border. Israel had under international law, had absolutely correct claims that Lebanon had no claim to that. Hezbollah, in their way of negotiating, they sent some drones out towards the gas platforms and said, we'll destroy the gas platforms unless you agree to this. So the then Prime Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, and he was a lame duck, by the way. Lame ducks can do a lot of damage. If you remember back when Obama was a lame duck, Trump had been elected, and what did the Obama administration do? They refused to veto Resolution 2334 at the UN Security Council, which was very anti-Israel, anti-Jerusalem, pro-Palestinian, all of that stuff. So the Obama administration, they're on their way out of office in 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, in late 2016. And they put in place many, many things to make it difficult for President Trump to navigate. So if Trump wins this election, expect the same thing. So you need to pay very careful attention between when the election results come in and it's decided who won. That may not be apparent, particularly if it's Trump. I would expect that there will be a lot of challenges to his election, just like there were. And go watch the videos of what Democrats said back in 2016 when Trump got elected. And then compare that to what they say happened in 2020. They don't go away carefully, or easily, or graciously, the Democrats. So anyway, so back to the maritime deal. So there's this dispute over the maritime border. There's gas deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean off the coast of Israel. You can see Haifa and Nahariya there. And just north of Nahariya is the border. And depending on how that border is drawn, Lebanon may or may not have any rights to one of those gas fields. Lapid essentially signed away Israel's rights to that gas field. Now, interestingly enough, Lebanon after that agreement, they entered into a contract with a French company called Total Energy. Total Energy has come in, and there's long been a close relationship between Lebanon and the French government. I don't know how that's benefited Lebanon in any way, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. But Total, by the way, has come in and drilled a couple or two or more wells to see what kind of gas or oil they can get from these deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean that Lebanon now claims they have a right to. Israel's drilling in the same area, and they're finding all kinds of gas and oil. Total comes in, they put in, I think it was 2 wells, and all they got back was sand and water. Now, I think there's some sort of divine judgment or justice there that's going on. I don't think that it's, when the guys on the other side of the imaginary line are getting all kinds of gas and oil, and you come in and all you get is sand and water, something is going on. Now, of course, what did the Hezbollah and those people say? Well, Israel, they're stealing all of it. Okay, prove it. I'm telling you what, the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff I'm seeing from so many people is just absolutely mind-boggling. So that's what Yair Lapid did. So in this tweet, this guy says, well, we're doing all this stuff. Remember, Yair Lapid got this thing done really well. And this is what Seth Frantzman said, and Seth is exactly 100% correct. Seth, by the way, follow him at Jerusalem Post, and I think Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and there's a couple other places. Just follow him. He's a very intelligent guy. This deal was sold as bringing security and stability and brought the opposite, and no one involved in it has admitted it. Empowered and emboldened Hezbollah. Doha, that's Qatar, also was linked to it with the hope of having a roll off the coast so it could be in Gaza and southern Lebanon, able to pressure Israel on 2 fronts. I don't know why we trust the Qataris. people from Qatar. I mean, I don't know. They're not trustworthy. They're Muslim Brotherhood. They have a different agenda. I know we have a base. The United States has a base in Qatar, but enough is enough. They are no friends. So here's the most scary question Seth asks. And remember, so this gas agreement was signed back in, I believe, November of 2022, somewhere in the last days of the year Lapid administration. And when I was in Israel in December 22, they were still forming the government. The Knesset was meeting, but they hadn't really got the coalitions put together to select the prime minister. It was pretty obvious then that it was going to be Netanyahu, but the question, and everybody was having, that doesn't like Netanyahu, which there are a lot of people, they were having a meltdown about that. So Seth asked this question, this was last Sunday tweet, the most scary question, did it embolden Hamas and lead Hamas to believe October 7th would work because Iran would bring in Hezbollah and Hamas, believe the U.S. would pressure Israel into another deal? So understand that everything that Iran does, everything that Hezbollah does, everything that Hamas does is part of a war, but they also consider it a negotiation. So Iran never does anything I had a friend who knew a lot of Iranians, and this sounds racist, but he said, I like Persian rugs, but if you've never negotiated for a Persian rug, you will never understand how the Iranians negotiate. Now, this was another attorney, by the way, and he negotiated like an Iranian in negotiations that we had, so he knew what he was talking about. So this is Tony Badran at Across the Bay. That's his Twitter handle. The threat of regional war, which was the Obama faction's talking point since October 7th, was simply an attempt by the Obama faction to save Iran's deterrence equity and prevent Israel from doing what it did in 2 weeks. And that's true. Israel has been hamstrung by the Biden administration. That's pretty clear. So let's look a little bit about what happened. So Nasrallah is taken out, and these are the headlines of the front pages of the Tehran Times just this past week. So this is a memorial to Nasrallah. We will seal his fate. The resistance will deal more crushing blows to Israel. That's what Khamenei said. Hezbollah is is relentless. That's why I titled the thing Relentless Escalation. Resistance movements, religious and political figures condemn the Nasrallah assassination. Iran mourns Nasrallah with nationwide allies. So that was early. This was after Nasrallah is dead. They haven't had a funeral for him yet. Then the next thing it says is there is a response that is certain. Iran, understand that the Hezbollah, through Al-Akbar and its Al-Manar website, media website, will say what they're going to do. They will give you that information. That's why a lot of guys who are involved in open source intelligence, and I saw Dr. Mordecai Kadar, and by the way, I'm in discussions with Dr. Kadar. It's possible he may be here in November on a Thursday evening or something. We'll get that someplace in Columbus. It's possible that he'll be here at that time. And I saw an interview with Dr. Kadar, who's probably the leading Israeli expert in the world on Islam and Arabic culture. He is an expert. He speaks fluent Arabic. He understands the Quran. He understands the tribal nature of their culture. And I heard him doing an interview the other day, and then the host was arguing with him, well, how do you know that they're going to do this? And he goes, because I read their stuff. All the open source intelligence people read their stuff, and they're able to determine, Hezbollah, Iran, and everybody, they will tell you what they're going to do, and then they will do it. So you ought to probably pay attention to what they're saying. So here it is, front page of the Tehran Times, Iran saying, we're going to make a response. Next day, this is the front page of the Tehran Times. We're ready. We're coming after Israel. And what do they put in the picture? A ballistic missile. At the same time, this is the memorial edition of the Al-Akbar to the Hezbollah. This is what was released by the Israeli IDF Arabic spokesperson. You see the dominoes falling. And this is true. And then the question was, okay, who's next? And the answer is we now know who's next because they've taken out a whole bunch of people since they took out Nasrallah. The guy appointed, as I said, the guy appointed to replace Nasrallah appears to have been killed. The Al Radwan Brigade guys were all killed. I guess that was before Nasrallah. It's been just every day there's something else. I mean, there's important people in the Hezbollah command and control structure and important people in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that are being taken out. A lot of them in Beirut, a lot of others in other places. And down here, by the way, the Almanar banner with Nasrallah on the left and the Dome of the Rock on the right says he is the master of the martyrs on the road to Jerusalem. So understand that everything that Hezbollah does is about getting control of Jerusalem. They want Jerusalem. Because what happens if they get Jerusalem? Israel will go away. That's the ultimate goal. They want to get completely rid of Israel. So in conjunction with the paper, the Tehran Times, Ayatollah Khomeini has a couple of Twitter accounts, Khomeini Media and Khomeini.ir, I think is the other one. And he says, look, help from Allah and an imminent victory. But look at what's in the picture. I don't know if it shows up real well in the, you see what this is? This is underground, this is missile storage underground. You see the Iranian flags, you see the missiles taking off and everything. So what are they saying? We're coming after Israel. We're going to bring in the missiles. We're going to fire missiles at you. And then what happens? So last Tuesday, I think it was, everything broke loose. Iran engaged in the largest ballistic missile attack by one country against another country in human history. Now, there have been a lot of ballistic missiles fired in war, but not initially when it first started. I had people in Israel, and the news from Israel was there's 400 or 500 of these things coming in. It turned out there was only 180. And I'm going to show you, just 180 ballistic missiles fired at a small country. I mean, this is my Red Alert app. That's Israel under warnings on Tuesday. Randy Smith, Randy, he's in Jerusalem right now. He's sort of like, he lives in North Carolina now, I think. So it's sort of like, and he lives in the mountains of North Carolina. And you pray for his son was living in a house that Randy owned, is my understanding. And the house was destroyed. They lost their cars. They had to hike out several miles under very bad conditions to get someplace where they could be airlifted to safety. So this was a ballistic missile attack unlike we've ever seen. So here's a thing called AI.
Now let's take a look how the Israeli defense system works. The Israeli defense system consists of 3 tiers. First up is the long-range aero missile defense system, which was designed specifically with Iranian missiles in mind. Each of these system rockets costs a few $1,000,000, and they can intercept missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere, resulting in enhanced protection. The second layer of defense is the so-called David Sling system, designed for taking out missiles and drones. Finally, the Iron Dome stops most short-range rocket attacks in Israel. Let's take a look at why the Iron Dome failed to intercept the Iranian ballistic missiles. Apart from discussing the multi-layered missile defense system, the Iron Dome itself has a range of around 40 miles, while the David Sling can intercept ballistic missiles up to a range of 180 miles. The top-tier Arrow anti-ballistic missile systems can target threats up to 1,500 miles away. According to reports, 180 ballistic missiles, which are possibly hypersonic as claimed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, were launched. Although the Arrow missile defense system successfully intercepted many missiles before they reached Israel, many still got through. The main problem behind the failure to intercept was after the detachment of the glide vehicle from the launcher. The glide vehicle can change its trajectory multiple times, which confused the Arrow missiles. This maneuver also bypassed the David Sling and finally the Iron Dome system, which is not designed to counter hypersonic missiles like the Fata II model. As a result, the interceptor missed their targets and the glide vehicle landed on military bases where the $100 million F-35 jets were stationed. Let's examine the cost implications of a single day of missile attacks. Iran expended over $200 million by launching ballistic missiles along with drones, whereas the IDF spent $1 billion to defend itself. This includes the Arrow missile, which costs around $2.5 million. The David Sling costs around $1 million to produce, while the Iron Dome costs around $20,000 to $100,000 for a single missile, depending on inflation. By contrast, Iranian ballistic missiles cost around $200,000 each, and its drones only $20,000 to $50,000 each.
Okay, so that's sort of, you can see the cost-benefit ratio. Defending against it is more expensive than causing the problem. And that's true with drones and all this new technology. And believe me, AI and computers and all this are changing the technology with regard to weapons systems like you wouldn't believe. That's why, I know I always get in trouble when I say this, Ukraine has done better than people thought against Russia because they've developed technology. They're manufacturing drones, even though they're, I don't know how else to say, getting crushed by Russia. And they're causing a lot of problems. That's why that war hasn't ended, I think. So here's a little bit of an explanation from AI Tele. Great website if you want simple graphics and good pictures and that type of thing to explain how hypersonic missiles work. Now, there were claims that these were hypersonic missiles. A bunch of them hit. They were not all shot down, but also understand that the Arrow 3 system, David Sling system, and the Iron Dome are not designed to shoot down every missile. So when the missiles are shot, there's algorithms that are built into the Israeli system, and they evaluate where is that missile going to land. If it's going to land in an open field, or I would think that they also have this built in, if it's going to hit a building that's unoccupied and isn't that expensive to rebuild or replace, they just let it go. Because, like I said, an Arrow 3 missile is $2.5 million. So if you have a building that will cost you $200,000 to rebuild, why waste a $2.5 million missile? It's sort of an economic calculus. By the way, in the entire attack, and you can see the video of it, I'm not going to play the video for you, there was only one person killed in the Iranian attack, and I believe there were no injuries. There was one person killed, and I believe that was a missile that had been hit, and it fell out of the sky, and it fell on an Arab guy in Jericho. And these missiles are big, and it crushed him. It just flattened him and killed him. So here's a little bit about how the hypersonic missiles work and why they're so difficult to defend against.
This is the Fata II, the successor to the Fata I. It was used for the first time and is one of Iran's advanced missile systems. This missile is equipped with a hypersonic glide vehicle. Inside it is the warhead, which detaches and allows the missile to maneuver and glide at speeds between Mach 5 and 10. The missile has a range of around 1,500 kilometers, only slightly more than its predecessor, the Fatah one. What sets it apart from other ballistic missiles is its ability to accelerate outside the Earth's atmosphere, while its aerodynamic control surfaces enable steering to evade the famous Aero Missiles defense system made by Israel. But first, let's look at what is a hypersonic missile. Hypersonic missiles are a challenging technology to master because they are so fast that if the US launched a Scramjet missile, it could reach China in just 18 minutes, traveling at speeds of Mach 5 and above. These Scramjet engines collect oxygen from the atmosphere as they travel, mixing it with hydrogen fuel to create the combustion needed for hypersonic flight. Meanwhile, glide hypersonic vehicles like the Chinese Dongfeng 17 became the first to integrate into production with conventional and nuclear warheads. They are also designed to target US aircraft carriers, as they can change their trajectory mid-flight. This US Aero AGM hypersonic weapon is a missile within a missile which pops out its cover and uses only the glide vehicle kinetic energy as a weapon. And not to forget the Russian hypersonic missile like the Kinzhal. To qualify as a hypersonic missile, it must possess 3 key attributes: speed, maneuverability, and accuracy. Let's look at speed. As we all know, Mach 1 represents the speed of sound, which serves as our benchmark. To better understand this, let's make a few comparisons. Commercial airliners, for example, fly subsonically, just below Mach 1. In contrast, modern fighter jets can travel supersonically, reaching speeds of Mach 2 or 3. When we refer to hypersonic speeds, we're talking about anything Mach 5 and above. Space shuttles are an example of vehicles that travel hypersonically, often reaching speeds between Mach 20 and 24. But these can travel only for short distances at this speed. To sum it up, a hypersonic missile should cross Mach 25, which is around 19,000 miles per hour. But wait, that's not it. Hypersonic missiles should also have the capability of covering vast distances, such as from New York to Russia or from China to Texas and vice versa. Before we looked into how Fatah missiles managed to penetrate Israeli air defense, we have to understand how Arrow 3 missile works. The Aero Missile Defense System consists of 3 basic parts: the missile launcher unit, the green pine radar antenna, and...
So you can go to AI Tele on YouTube and watch that and get that information. So what happened was, you saw the video there where the missiles were just hit. Now some of that is, I think, clever editing. Some of those missiles had been hit by the Arrow 3 system, and then they dropped down to where they didn't do that much damage. So here is one of the targets was the Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert in the south of Israel. That's where they have a squadron of, it's believed, about 20 F-35s. And these F-35s are very, very expensive airplanes, $200 million each and above. So you don't want, for example, if you're in the Air Force and you crash an F-35, you're probably going to be doing something else for the rest of your Air Force career. It's a very expensive piece of equipment. Now, the propaganda channels, of which I seem to be the recipient of a lot of their stuff, they said, oh, we destroyed all the F-35s at Nevatim. I don't know that that's true. I don't even think any of them were damaged. I don't think that the damage was that severe at the air base. There were some buildings hit. You can see these supposed impacts, and you can look at, there are a lot of people doing satellite analyses of what happened. I don't think they were, the damage was that bad. And of course, now, by the way, there's an island, I think I have a slide about it elsewhere, but everybody asks, what's Israel going to do? Israel's probably going to respond. Israel says we're going to respond in a big way. Iran has 90% of its oil transferred through a Karj island in the Persian Gulf. And people watch this, everything is available on satellite. I mean, flights, so you can see that airspace over Iran is shut down right now. You can see airspace over Israel is, when it's shut down, it's very easy to find this. And there are these websites like Marine Traffic. You go to marine traffic, and it will show you where every oil tanker in the world is located. So usually, because Iran is selling a lot of oil, because our government has rolled back the sanctions on that, I don't care what Karine Jean-Pierre says, Iran has gone from selling 200,000 barrels a day to 3 million. 3 million barrels a day requires tankers, and so tankers come and go from Karj Island all the time. There's none there right now. I checked marine traffic this morning. They moved them all, right? Why? Because they think Israel might bomb Karj Island, and they don't want to lose the oil tankers. So if Iran does that with its oil tankers, isn't it safe to assume that Israel does that with its F-35s? They know that the F-35s, that would be a big trophy for the Iranians to get with a missile. They send in a $200,000 missile. They take out a $200 million or more jet. That's a pretty good cost-benefit ratio. So Israel probably moved their F-35s, flew them to Cyprus or someplace else to get them out of the way. And so understand, this is tremendous propaganda. So this is Khomeini's website. This is stuff I got from his website. And he says, Zionist regime won't last long. The year-long resistance of Gaza and Lebanon have brought the usurping regime to a point where its main concern is to protect its existence, the same concern it had in the early years of its cursed creation. This means resistance has pushed back the Zionist regime to 70 years ago. They were afraid they weren't going to make it then. They're afraid they're not going to make it now. It's a lot of the war is psychological as well. So after the attack, Netanyahu responded. This is what he had to say to citizens of Israel. He says this evening that the Iran made a big mistake. And we're coming up on the anniversary of the first 1 year of the 10/7 attack. There's a murderous guiding hand behind this terrorist attack. It came from Tehran. This evening, Iran again attacked Israel with hundreds of missiles. This attack failed. It was thwarted thanks to Israel's air defense array, which is the most advanced in the world. I commend the IDF for the impressive achievement. It was thwarted thanks to your alertness and responsibility, citizens of Israel. I also thank the U.S. for its support in our defensive effort. And it was a pretty amazing...
Are you saying Hassan Nasrallah?
It was a pretty amazing response. Hang on here, I want to... And by the way, this is not without cost to the average person in Israel. 10 million people went to bomb shelters in Israel. You saw the map of the warnings in the attack. Everybody went to a bomb shelter. And that has a psychological effect on everybody. Children were going to bomb shelters. I did an interview with Nicole Jen-Shajan the other day, and you can see that. Now, one of the leading propagandists in the world is Christiane Amanpour from CNN. And this is what she asked the foreign minister of Lebanon on CNN about Nasrallah. Okay, Nasrallah is taken out. But you don't know the facts that Christiane Amanpour does, do you? Here's what she got from these Lebanese foreign ministers. This is unbelievable. Well, let's go here. Not sure why this is not playing.
Are you saying Hassan Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire just moments before he was assassinated?
He agreed, yes. We agreed completely, Lebanon agreed to ceasefire, but consulting with the Hezbollah, the speaker, Mr. Berry, consulted with Hezbollah, and we informed the Americans and the French that what happened. And they told us that Mr. Netanyahu also agreed on the statement that was issued by both presidents.
So do you see what the narrative here is? It's all Benjamin Netanyahu, the evil Jews. Nasrallah agreed to a ceasefire. just moments before. But how does he communicate from down below in his little tunnel? Because he's not using a pager, right? He's not using a cell phone. It's crazy. So here's a little bit about, somebody said, how bad is it in Beirut? People are leaving Beirut and going to Syria. That's how bad it is in Beirut. And remember, by the way, when Nasrallah was killed, there were celebrations all over Syria in the Syrian democratic forces, the Syrian resistance areas. They were passing out sweet. There was bigger celebrations in Lebanon and Syria about Nasrallah being gone than there were in Israel. And there's a issue of being too euphoric about, okay, what's the phrase from probably my least favorite movie of all time, The Wizard of Oz, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, or whatever that is. I hate that. I do not like that movie. So I shouldn't say hate, but I do hate it for good reasons. And it's like, if you get the song, see, now that song's going to be in my head all day long. And I have only myself to blame. So here's a look. This is a video that I don't remember what the website this is. It shows some of right now, Israel's making incursions into southern Lebanon across that border. They're taking out Hezbollah tunnels. And what's happening is the people are fleeing. Everybody in the south is leaving unless they're really determined to stay there. Israel is attacking all across Lebanon, up into the Bekaa Valley, Beirut, even up into Tripoli and other places. I think a Hezbollah commander or an Iranian guy was taken out in Tripoli the other day. So if you've ever been in northern Israel, along the border there's a town called Nahariya. And just north of Nahariya is a place called Rosh Hanikra. It's on the border with Israel. So this is a picture looking towards the Med at Rosh Hanikra. And here is a video from the IDF about them taking out tunnels. And when you look at these tunnels, watch the secondary explosions to take place. And that's the border right there on the left. And that's Rosh Hanikra right there at the top left. You see the other missiles going off, that means they've gotten missiles. So by some estimates, they think that Israel has taken out about 50% of Hezbollah's capability to launch missiles in the last couple of weeks. That's a pretty stunning thing. They've taken out, I think the other day, they took out 400 or 500 Hezbollah fighters, but it's not been without cost. There were 8 Israelis killed. The other day, there were 2 that were killed in a Iraqi drone or rocket attack in the Golan Heights, 21 injured, a few critically. So this is coming at a great cost to Israel as well. Let's see if there's any. So, and these things are right along the border. Sometimes they're in buildings, sometimes they're in homes, and that type of thing. Here's the report today that 8 IDF soldiers were killed in Lebanon, but they also banned Antonio Guterres from coming to Israel. Good. I think he has nothing of benefit to offer. Now, this is an article that was in the Washington Post the other day, and it says that the ground offensive that's currently going on in Lebanon in the last year, since October 7th, remember October 7th happened, October 8th, there were missiles, rockets started being fired by Hezbollah into Israel. Over 10,000 have been fired, and nobody ever talks about that. All the anti-Israel people, Israel's attacking Lebanon. Yeah, you shot 10,000 rockets at us, missiles at us from Lebanon over the last year. What do you expect us to do? Because what have they done? They've shrunk Israel by at least 10%, if not more, because they've left the border because they can't live there. Whole towns have been destroyed. Half of the towns in some cases, have been completely destroyed by these rockets and missiles. People are not inclined to live places where missiles and rockets are falling down on their heads. It's kind of, people are very funny about that. They want water, they want electricity, and they don't want missiles falling on their heads. It's a pretty, and they even want food every now and then too. So here is Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. He's the spokesperson for the IDF. And I'm going to play a few minutes of this. He's talking about what really happened. So he's talking about the fact that Israel's been going into Lebanon on these raids. Nobody's heard about this. And this just came out. They had a big meeting the other day. They had declassified a lot of stuff. You can go to the IDF website. I've been trying to find it. I've not been able to find it. But here's Hagari talking about what they've found over the last year in southern Lebanon.
On October 8th, the Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon launched an unprovoked attack on Israel. Hezbollah chose to join the war that Hamas started on October 7th with their brutal massacre in southern Israel. Since then, Hezbollah has fired over 9,500 rockets at Israeli homes, families, and communities, forcing 60,000 Israelis to evacuate their homes. Hezbollah has openly declared that it plans to carry out its own October 7th massacre on Israel's northern border, but on an even larger scale. They call this plan Conquer the Galilee. For years, Hezbollah has been planning to do in northern Israel what Hamas did in southern Israel on October 7th. Invade Israel, infiltrate civilian communities, and massacre innocent civilians. To make sure that Hezbollah can never carry out such an attack, and in order to enable all 60,000 Israelis to safely return back to their homes in northern Israel, the IDF is taking action. Hezbollah planned to launch their October 7th attack from villages across southern Lebanon, where they have been building up their arms capabilities and forces for the last 2 decades. Hezbollah also dug tunnels under homes in these villages close to the border with Israel. Tonight, we are declassifying a series of IDF operations conducted since the beginning of the war, aimed at dismantling Hezbollah's terrorist infrastructure and capabilities in the area of the Israel-Lebanon border, as part of our efforts to make sure that the residents of northern Israel can return to their home in safety and security without the threat of Hezbollah on their doorstep. During these operations, IDF special forces entered into Hezbollah compounds in dozens of locations along the border with Israel, collected intelligence, dismantled Hezbollah's weapons and terrorist infrastructures. Our soldiers entered Hezbollah's underground infrastructures, exposed Hezbollah's hidden weapon caches, and seized and destroyed the weapons, including advanced Iranian-made weapons. Overall, IDF soldiers exposed and dismantled over 700 Hezbollah terror assets during these operations. And there's a lot more work to do. Tonight, I will declassify details of 3 of these special operations. This is the village of Misl Jabal. It is a Lebanese village close to the border with Israel, only a few hundred meters away from the Israeli city of Kiryat Shmona. Since the beginning of the war, the majority of over 20,000 residents of Kiryat Shmona had to evacuate their homes after coming under fire from Hezbollah's relentless attacks. We have operated against hundreds of terrorist targets embedded inside Misl Jabal, which directly threaten the city of Kiryat Shmona and the wider northern region. Many of the Lebanese residents of Misl Jabal have left the area due to the Hezbollah terrorist activities. As part of this operation, we collected intelligence on this house, on the edge of the Lebanese village, near the border with Israel, which you can see here. The house was used by Hezbollah terrorists who dug underground infrastructure below it. This combat infrastructure was used by the terrorists to store weapons and was planned to be the preparation area for Hezbollah terrorists before attempting to invade Israeli territory. During the operation, the troops conducted a targeted raid on the house and revealed a large amount of weapons stored on the ground floor. In the basement, our soldiers found an elevated platform built to hide a shaft that led to an underground tunnel. The soldiers exposed the tunnel 150 meters long that did not cross into Israeli territory, that was excavated in stone. At the end of the activity, we dismantled the tunnel and the house in a joint ground and aerial strikes. Another example is the Lebanese village of Farkile, on the border just a few hundred meters away from the Israeli town of Metula. Metula has been one of the most heavily attacked Israeli communities over the last year. We have conducted hundreds of strikes and operations against Hezbollah terror infrastructure in Farkile in order to remove these threats to Israeli families that want to go back home. In one operation, we followed precise intelligence regarding an underground tunnel used by Hezbollah to hide weapons. IDF soldiers conducted targeted raid on this house, and during scans in the children's room, there, under the bed, they located an underground tunnel shaft. The soldiers went inside the tunnel shaft and revealed a 100-meter-long underground tunnel excavated in stone. The troops scanned the tunnel and found weapons stored in barrels. In one of the rooms, they exposed weapons storage facility intended to be used by Hezbollah on the day of the planned invasion.
So this was the plan, was they were going to come across the border. So a podcast that I listen to, they put up a couple a week. It's also on YouTube, called Call Me Back. Dan Senor is the host. A couple days ago, he had on Nadav Eyal. Sounds like he's from North Carolina. I say it like an American, obviously. But a smart guy. I think I don't know what his politics are, but he's an analyst, journalist. And so they had a talk. So I'm going to play a few minutes of this because I think it's very interesting. He's going to talk a little bit about the IDF operations and that type of thing. Then they're going to go into a discussion about what Daniel Hagari was talking about was the plan. What was the plan that they had, particularly when we're coming up tomorrow on the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th attack?
First of all, understand that Ibrahim Akil and Fuad Shukr had a prize on their heads put by the US government of $7 million and $5 million. And just in the last 24 hours, Israel assassinated in the Dahya in Beirut, Muhammad Jafar Kassir, whose nickname is Hajj Fadi. He's the commander of the 400 unit of Hezbollah, and he's responsible for transferring weapons between Iran and Hezbollah. And he had a prize on his head of $10 million. So he was much more important for the US government than Ibrahim Akil, which was the head of the Hezbollah operations. And this is not even, reported, right? And the reason it's not reported is because it's a daily thing. And on the other hand, Dan, I want to warn us against being euphoric. And we saw that, in the last 24 hours in Israel, which have been extremely difficult. Israel has been attacked, and this was a substantial attack by Iran. The IDF spokesperson is saying that Israeli army bases have been hit, that no material ability of the Israelis has been hit. Israeli Air Force is in full capacity in operation. Nobody died. Nobody, as far as we know, got injured. But he is saying that there was damage to Israeli army bases. There are videos online. This was a substantial ballistic attack against Israel, and Israel obviously did not take all of these missiles down. And Iran and Hezbollah has much to go. Then at the same time, when Israel is fighting this war in the skies, at the same time, exactly, we see the challenges of the ground with the terror attack in Jaffa, in Tel Aviv.
We will get to the Iranian attack, and we'll obviously get to the Jaffa attack. I just want to talk about the ground invasion, which we've been hearing so much about, but we don't see much of it. So, and you told me offline that this is typical for the IDF in terms of how it's fighting, certainly how it's been fighting in Gaza, that we don't see that much. We don't know that much. That's intentional. What can you tell us about the ground operation and what these ground operations have revealed, like what the IDF, I guess, has just revealed in terms of what's been secretly in the works over the past few months?
So first of all, if our listeners want to go on the IDF spokesman website, they can see, I think there, the videos, the amazing videos of what the IDF has been doing, not during these ground operations, but in the last 11 months. IDF special units and commander units have been penetrating sovereign Lebanese territory, and they've been bringing home a lot of intelligence, attacking fortifications of Hezbollah, again, beyond the Israeli line, very secret operations of these units. And one of the things that they've been bringing home is just an amazing amount of ammunitions and missiles. And you can see this. And what the IDF spokesman then did very cleverly, I think, is that he had his people go with these units. So you can actually see the operations there. You can see the IDF going into, an area in South Lebanon that looks innocent, and they find in the middle of the woods a hidden door, and they go to the tunnel, and you see them going inside the tunnel, and then they find there those missiles that they wanted to shoot, and the actual preparation down for another October 7, but 1,000 times more powerful. I watched the Israeli Channel 12 military correspondent Nir Dvori. He was asked after these operations were revealed, what do they mean? And he quoted something that a senior army official told him at the beginning of the war. He told him that if Hezbollah would have surprised Israel in the north, the Nukhba and Hezbollah would have shaken hands in Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv. So, first of all,
chilling. That is just chilling.
I want to say, this is what Dvori said, and I want to say about this that
I just want our listeners to process what you're saying. The vision was Hamas's commandos would make their way from the south up, heading north into the center of the country, and Hezbollah's commandos would penetrate Israel's northern border and move its way south, which means they would completely overrun the country. That was the vision. That was the plan.
That was the plan.
So just basically squeezing Israel from both sides.
But, when I say that was the plan, I want to be extremely careful about saying that was the plan. Why? Because we know that Hezbollah did not surprise Israel. It attacked Israel on October 8, but it was not part of the timing of the Hamas attack. And I think it wasn't by mistake. Now, I want to say something important. And again, Israel saw in the north and was preparing in the north for a possible Hezbollah attack. This is what we have been saying in these chapters. And because of that, Hezbollah was exposed. And because it was exposed, Israel deducted in the north, quite rightly so, that there is not going to be a surprise attack. And Israel was right. The Israeli intelligence was so focused on the north, was preparing the third Lebanon war, but it was also seeing that the Radwan force is not ready. And now you and I can see that the fact is that Hezbollah was penetrated by the Israeli intelligence. So it's not by mistake that the Radwan force and the Nukhba didn't shake hands in Dizengoff. Israel was very ill prepared and totally failed in the south, a failure that will echo for generations. Israel was prepared in the north and overly prepared in a sense, and this is the reason why it also considered a preemptive surprise attack 3 days after Hezbollah attacked it because it saw that Hezbollah isn't ready. And let me tell you something about that I'm not sure was published. After Israel considered that and decided not to, a message was delivered to Hezbollah through a third party saying to them, stop your war in the north. We are ready to act. And they heard this thing leak on Israeli press about October 11. It began by American press, of course, but then it leaked also to Israeli press. And Nasrallah himself didn't believe that the Israelis even considered doing what they did. And as we saw to the end of the war, he didn't believe that the Israelis will go through.
So Nasrallah, who spent all that time talking about blinding Israel, was himself blinded. I will say to you, my belief is that there is a very supernatural thing going on here from God. We have a lot of stories in the Old Testament about how God has protected Israel and the Jews. The whole festival of Purim is based on a reversal, the great reversal that happened in Persia, by the way, where the advisor to the king wanted to hang Mordecai, the uncle of Queen Esther, on gallows. Actually, it probably wasn't by a rope. It was probably by impaling him on a stake. That's how they did that. And what happened? There was a complete reversal. The whole book of Esther. And they what? Hung or impaled Haman on the gallows prepared for Mordecai. We see with the Midianites, Gideon and the Midianites, a small force of 300 were able to defeat a horde of Midianites many times larger because they broke the pots, the lights came on, and they were confused. And I think that what we're seeing here is we're seeing God confusing Nasrallah many times. It happened over and over again. And so Nasrallah didn't think Israel was going to do that. So what Israel did was they pivoted and they said, okay, we're not going to do a big invasion. But you just saw the spokesperson say we did 700 sites in southern Lebanon. This is, I forget where I heard it this week, and I've said it myself before, that if you went to, I think it was at the beginning of this podcast, Matt Levitt, who was the other guy who was interviewed, and go to Call Me Back, it's on YouTube or Apple Podcast. He said, if you took this script of what's happened in the last 2 weeks to someone in Hollywood, they would say, we're not going to make this into a movie because it's too unbelievable. It has to be at least a little bit believable. But this is what's happened. So Israel's continued to attack. These are, attacks that happened in Lebanon over the last few days. Israel is, they're going after people. They are going after the people that they consider their enemies. There's been tremendous damage across Lebanon. Now, of course, this is from the National United Arab Emirates newspaper. Paramedics among dead in Israeli airstrikes on Beirut. But understand, if Israel wasn't doing this, it would be Israelis that were dead. It's war. Nobody likes war, but there is a certain justice to war. And again, this is the new Hezbollah chief. Nasrallah gets taken out. His cousin is appointed as the chief. He was targeted, and it appears that Ismail Qani, who was Soleimani's successor to the head of the Quds force in Iran, was in a meeting with this guy. Neither one of them have been heard from, and the estimation is that he's dead. Here's a picture of the Hezbollah guy being installed. And you can see the massive, I mean, this is a picture of a place in Beirut, just massive damage that's taking place. So the other part that is a big issue, though, is in what's called the West Bank. I use the term West Bank because when you say West Bank, everybody knows what you're talking about. It's really biblical Judea and Samaria. And they correspond, by the way, to the southern kingdom of Judah. Remember when Solomon died, the kingdom split into two. The southern kingdom of Judah, the northern kingdom of Israel. And that dividing line, by the way, was right around Bethel, around what would be today Ramallah. But I kind of got in, well, I didn't get into an argument with them because arguing implies that I was wrong. But I think that Bethel was in Samaria because it was in the northern kingdom. It wasn't in the southern kingdom of Judah. So, by the way, Joel Kramer has a great new video up on Expedition Bible about Bethel and what happened at Bethel. And this is the exact same place that Pam and I walked with Joel a number of years ago. Very, very, very important biblical site. It is a site, by the way, I have no question in my mind, this is where Jacob had his dream of the ladder to heaven. This is where Abraham had a camp. And it's also the place, I believe, that Abraham and Lot split up. And Lot, you can stand there and you can look from there all the way down into the Jordan Valley, even today. And Lot saw that and said, I want that stuff. I want that place. So they split up. But this area of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank in modern terms, is a very volatile area. Now, this is a publication. It's called The Cradle. It is an anti-Israel, anti-West, anti-freedom. But I read it because you always want to know what the enemies are thinking. And so this is what it says: obstacle to the occupation, the West Bank front line. Israel, since October 7th, has engaged in numerous attacks on new groups that are being formed in the area of the West Bank. That would be this red area in the mountains of Israel, Judea to the south and Samaria to the north. It's what they want to be the second, third, or fourth Palestinian state. That's what, when they talk about two-state solution, they want to give this high ground to the enemies of Israel, to the, quote, Palestinians. And you can see below that it's elevated, and in war, you always want to control the high ground. That's the high ground. It's also the watershed of Israel. You can't give it away. But what does everybody in the world say? Give it away. We have to have a two-state solution. But Ben Gurion Airport's down there in the plain. How hard do you think it would be to lob rockets, mortars, or things down there and shut down Ben Gurion Airport? So Israel did a major operation the other day. I don't know how many have been killed or taken into custody. I believe taken into custody since October 7th, maybe above 10,000, and killed maybe around 1,000 or more. Because these terror groups continually form, and Israel has good intelligence, and they get them as they're being born. In the response, the Palestinian resistance, this is from The Cradle, has called for mass mobilization across the West Bank, and Tulkarm's fighters have vowed retaliation. That's where the attack took place yesterday. I think there were 17 killed in that attack by the IDF, signaling that Israel's 10-day assault in August did little to weaken the resistance. The occupation's ongoing military failures indicate a deeper issue: Israel's inability to fully suppress the resistance in the West Bank, despite its attempts to do so. They're working on suppressing them. There's a way to do that. Put them in prison or get rid of them. That's how it happens. Now, the French have come in today. This is Emmanuel Macron. We need to stop delivering arms for fighting in Gaza. And, the French are very, very brave. What was the old joke that I heard was, Why do they have trees along the Champs-Élysées in Paris? Because the conquering troops were complaining about marching in the sun. They wanted to march in the shade. So, and now the UK through Starmer has come out and said that they're not going to join any attack on Iran, and they're probably not going to be giving weapons or anything to Israel because they got to have a two-state solution. Netanyahu came out, and this is what he had to say specifically to Macron. The Starmer thing came after Netanyahu spoke yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
I have a message. I have a message for President Macron. Today, Israel is defending itself on 7 fronts against the enemies of civilization. We're fighting in Gaza against Hamas, those savages who murdered, raped, beheaded, and burned our people on October 7th. We're fighting in Lebanon against Hezbollah, the most heavily armed terror organization in the world, which was planning an even greater massacre than October 7th on our northern border, and that has rocketed Israeli towns and cities for nearly a year. We're fighting against the Houthis in Yemen and the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria that together have launched hundreds of drones and missile attacks against Israel. We're fighting against terrorists in Judea and Samaria who are trying to murder civilians in the heart of our cities. And we're fighting against Iran, which last week fired over 200 ballistic missiles directly at Israel, and which stands behind the 7-front war against Israel. As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support. But their shame will continue long after the war is won. For in defending ourselves against this barbarism, Israel is defending civilizations against those who seek to impose a dark age of fanaticism on all of us. Rest assured, Israel will fight until the battle is won, for our sake and for the sake of the peace and security of the entire world.
And so, by the way, here, okay, thank you. I think that was pretty clear. It's nice to have, whether you like him or not, he's very clear at times. I mean, there's no mistake where he's coming from. So here's a tweet. It says this: after calling to halt arms deliveries to Israel just 2 days before the anniversary of October 7, it turns out French President Macron never actually delivered any arms to Israel. And that shows the bravery of this man, right? And Carolyn Glick tweeted, I didn't have time to grab a screenshot of it. She tweeted, as did David Wormser, their suspicion that the reason why Macron wants to get this resolved and Israel to back off is that what's going to be exposed is the French government's connection to Hezbollah and funding Hezbollah. We know that the French energy company Total is there, right? Just like we had guys in our administration like Amos Hochstein who are involved in the energy industry shutting down Israel gas to Europe. So follow the money. It usually takes you to where you need to go. Nisla Kristof has the most ridiculous article in the New York Times this morning. Biden sought peace but facilitated war. I don't know if this was some kind of, well, I can't make that comment. That's not. Text me privately. I'll tell you what I think of Nicholas Kristof. Iran's hand on Israel. So this is Tehran Times, and then here is 1 million people bust into the big square in Tehran for the memorial service to Nasrallah. There's a good article in the Jerusalem Post. I think Seth Frantzman wrote one of them, and then there was a another person, I think it's Pakistani, wrote that the Iranian regime is weak, should not be strengthened now, put sanctions on them, shut down their oil, the regime will collapse. They may be down to their last $10 billion. They are internally falling apart, but they project things through their proxies. They act like they're strong, like they're the big dog in the Middle East, the strong horse in the Middle East, when in fact they may be weak. Remember that it was about 2 years ago in the Tehran Times, there was a very interesting blurb in their own newspaper that said, we have had in Iran the fastest collapse in female fertility of any country in human history. They're running out of people. People don't want to produce children to live under a monstrous regime like this. And the left in America loves them, and our government does love them too. At The Spectator, a good article by Jonathan Spire. I'm going to play a clip of him here as we close up today. Israel's likely to hit back hard against Iran. Jonathan is probably one of the top, if not the top military journalist, analyst in the Middle East. He's just superb. So go read that article. You can you just have to put your email in and you can get a free article at the Spectator this time. And then what he says is, Israel must signal to Iran that such aggression will be met with a determined escalatory response. The escalation has to be relentless in this particular situation. And Joe Biden doesn't care I don't know that he can analyze it anymore. And the government doesn't care. They want to promote Iran. That's what they do all the time. And I think it's ridiculous. But go listen to Dan Senor. I'll try to put the links to these podcasts and YouTubes in the show notes. Over at Free Press, Barry Weiss, who used to be with the New York Times until she couldn't stand the anti-Semitism there, and she's not a conservative or anything like that. She's a good thinker. She had on Douglas Murray the other day, and Douglas Murray had this to say about what's going on. Here we go.
Now they have this. This is the fruit of their labor.
We now know from Financial Times reporting over the past few days that Israel, in the days after October 7th, had a way, or they believe they had a way, to get Nasrallah, and the Americans stopped them. And there's story after story about how the Americans sort of interceded. And the theme that emerges for me is they seem to view not the terrorist group, not Iran, not Islamic totalitarianism as the enemy, but escalation itself as the enemy.
Yes, and the problem is that when you need to win a war, you need to escalate. Absolutely, you need to escalate. And, I mean, by the way, I don't know. Everything I ever know about, when I read a story about it in the Financial Times, they're always wrong. It's possible they're right on something to do with Ecuadorian politics every now and then. I don't know. But on anything I know about it, the Financial Times doesn't seem to me to be a very very respectful journal. But maybe they're right. I heard that rumor from elsewhere. Of course, the whole thing is always about de-escalation. Always de-escalation. This is this madness, as again, of people, governments drunk on peace, thinking that peace is the only thing that should ever happen. And you don't need to go back to Ecclesiastes to know this, but perhaps we can. To everything there is under the sun, there is a season. And those are...
So this is, this is from the Ayatollah Khamenei's website. Just so you know that Hezbollah thinks it's about Jerusalem and Israel, getting rid of Israel. The Ayatollah says this: holy Quds will be in the hands of the Muslims, and the Islamic world will celebrate the liberation of Palestine. And there it is, the Dome of the Rock. And I've told you my personal hope is that AI that might be incorporated into missile targeting. We'll see these pictures that the Ayatollah puts up in what I refer to as the Dome of the Rock bouncy house, that inflatable Dome of the Rock that Iran carts around the country whenever they're doing an announcement. They blow up with air, they blow up the Dome of the Rock. Maybe the missiles will get targeted and say, oh, that must be a good target, so we're going to take out that particular target. Let's hope that that happens. That would sort of accelerate a lot of things that we talk about in the end times. So Khomeini, and this was the BBC, by the way. I'm going to try to do something on this. There was a thing called the Sasserson Report, a British lawyer. We love lawyers here at FBC, right? That lawyer out there said, amen, I agree with that. But this is the BBC, he did a report on the BBC, and the BBC, it was like 1,500 times in 4 months violated its ethics on how it described the Israel-Hamas conflict. 1,500 times. So hope to talk to him in the near future. But this is the BBC. Khomeini gets up there. He says this is the memorial for Hezbollah, for Nasrallah. And it says here, the October 7th attack was logical and legal. That's what it says. It says it was missile strikes on Israel were correct, logical, and lawful. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei told a vast crowd which had gathered to hear him speak in Tehran on Friday to praise a terrorist. Putin has come in and said they're monitoring Russia is monitoring the deteriorating conditions in the Middle East. By the way, in the weapons cache that were found in Lebanon were Russian-made weapons. So I guess I think you can buy them. Cabela's has a whole Russian-made weapons section, doesn't it? I don't think so. So this was another thing. The Saudi Crown Prince came out and said, listen, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, this was a thing called the Shura Council. He talked a couple weeks ago and he said, we will not recognize Israel without a Palestinian state. Now, I think this may change if the king dies. Here is the foreign minister speaking on the sidelines of the UN. It was called the Global Alliance for a Two-State Solution. They had a big meeting, 90 countries at the UN last week participated in this, and here is what the Saudi foreign minister had to say.
I think the Crown Prince's speech to the Shura Council was quite clear that we need to see the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that is what we are focused on.
And they had a big meeting. That the guy there to the right was Norway, and then the guy to his left was Borrell, who's the EU foreign minister. And then Douglas Murray mentioned the Financial Times, so let's give them credit. They had a full page or big half page op-ed by the Saudi Arabian foreign minister. A two-state solution has become more urgent than ever. And by the way, this guy keeps surfacing. This is a report from Reuters that Trump's son-in-law Kushner has discussed U.S.-Saudi diplomacy with the Saudi Crown Prince recently, and that he, of course, he pushed for the Abraham Accords, which I don't think they're a good thing. Because the heart of the Abraham Accords and everything that Jared Kushner did was to bring about, by his own words, peace and prosperity. Now that's a biblical term. And it says when they say peace and safety, what happens? Sudden destruction. So I think that there's the devil's in the details. And then the Swedish prime minister says she sees no end to the conflict in the Middle East unless a two-state solution is forced through some kind of a militia. The need for the international community to force a two-state solution through, she says. And that has kind of biblical connotations to it if you look at what it says in Daniel 9:27. So Israel's going to respond. Israel's got a lot of weapons to do that, sensitive sites, Karg Island. Israel has a lot of weapons that can reach that. Don't know what's going to happen. I would pay attention over the next 48 hours because the dates seem to work. We are right in the middle. The Feast of Trumpets was the other day. The Iranian missile attack was on the eve of the Feast of Trumpets. The Feast of Trumpets begins a 10-day period in Israel that ends on Yom Kippur, which I believe is October 12th. It's called the Days of Awe. And I think in the end times here, we will see this period of time become very significant, and it will be the Days of Awe for many reasons. So is something going to happen now? I'm not date setting or anything like that. I'm just saying it's called the Days of Awe. Oil prices are rising because of the fear of Iranian strikes. Could be on their nuclear facilities. Here's a graphic of Karg Island, oil terminal, and the red dots in the Persian Gulf. This is Iraq up to the left, Iran up to the right, Kuwait here to the left. Those are oil tankers. And that little white area over here, that's Karg Island. That's the big Iranian oil terminal in the Persian Gulf. And here's a close-up satellite view. This is from marine traffic just this morning. And what do you see? You don't see any oil tankers coming in there right now because I think they're thinking Israel may attack that very, very
Now they have this.
soon. Jerusalem Post has a great article today in their magazine 1 year later, October 7th. I will tell you about this. You can find this online. It's called The Killing Roads Movie. I do have a complete copy of it. It includes a lot of very difficult to watch footage of the October 7th massacre that occurred down around the Israeli border with Gaza. And so you can get that. It's free. You can find it on YouTube. You will have to sign in on YouTube to watch it because it is adult material. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to link. I will post these. I'll try to do that this afternoon. Rather than play it because we're getting a little bit. I only have another hour or so, hour and 45 minutes of stuff to cover. And a interview that the Quad at JNS TV, a Jewish News Syndicate, did with Jonathan Spire. It's about 27 minutes long. I would especially listen from about 15 minutes on. The last 10 minutes of it is very important. And Jonathan analyzes the Middle East. I'll just summarize it quickly and says that Israel is a very difficult thing. Iran is very clever. Iran is always negotiating. And Israel has to do something. And Israel is facing a very, very difficult situation. The host of the Quad, I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, she goes, it's kind of hard to be optimistic right now, even during our high holy days. And it is because it's very, very difficult situation. So on Piers Morgan, this is about 3 minutes. This is somebody defending Israel. I think it's important. Her name is Elika Laban, and she's on there with these pro-Iranian people. And Piers does a pretty good job of giving everybody a chance to speak, but she finally had a chance to speak. So listen to just a few minutes of this. Here she goes. She's in the third right, and the lady in the middle, that's the one who did the interview with Jonathan Spire, and I just can't remember her name. So listen.
Because
As you should.
Yeah,
As you should. I agree with you.
But these are the issues. These are the issues on. These are the issues on the Hamas Hezbollah side, which really I just can't. I don't see the answer. If you're ready to destroying it, yeah, Elika, yeah.
Terrorist groups. They're both
Let me bring in Elika.
Okay. So the entire arguments that are being made here are based on revisionist history. That's first things first. The even way that you frame Hezbollah as the victim, as the non-aggressor, to where you frame Israel as escalating despite Hezbollah's repeated history of aggression, okay? First of all, the way you even describe Hezbollah's inception is wrong. Let's talk about Hezbollah's inception, which was after the 1979 revolution. Let me finish. After the 1979 revolution in Iran, Hezbollah, okay, was inspired by this, and Assad visited Iran and asked Khomeini, what can we do for you? Khomeini said, give me a passage to Syria, to Lebanon, so I can export my radical ideologies over to Lebanon. They did that, and then they started killing the Shiite Muslims in the north of Lebanon while there was an invasion by Israel from the south. Why was there an invasion from the south? There was an invasion because the PLO were in southern Lebanon firing rockets into Israel after they just got expelled from Jordan because they were doing the same thing, hijacking planes, okay, landing them on revolutionary airports, blowing them up in front of international media. Then they go to southern Lebanon and they start destroying internal political dynamics in southern Lebanon. Now you have the Christian Maronites and the Muslims fighting each other in the first Lebanon civil war, okay? They destroyed Lebanon from within just because of the desire to launch its rockets from Lebanon into Israel. Then it went up to Beirut and started fighting with the Christian Maronites to assert domination in Lebanon. Why? Because they are jihadists. And then what happens in 1978, which is the first invasion of Israel into Lebanon. Why? Because the PLO did an attack on a bus in Israel that killed 38 people. Israel goes in to try and take out the PLO. And then the UN requires them to retreat, and they retreat, and then they send their UN interim forces for Lebanon, okay, to take out the PLO. The UN runs away and the PLO comes back, continues its attack, okay? The second invasion into Lebanon, because of the continued attacks, they go in once more, and because the PLO doesn't leave, they have to create this occupation, right? And then as soon as they removed the occupation in 2000 with Ehud Barak and Clinton, what happens is that Hezbollah advances to the border of Israel and starts attacking again. And then comes the UN resolution 1701 requiring not only that Hezbollah stays 10 kilometers back from the northern border, okay, but also that all of these militias in Lebanon have to disband, and there can only be a militarized Lebanese government. Israel abided. Who did not abide? Hezbollah. Then what did Hezbollah do for 18 years? For 18 years in the zone that they were not allowed to be, they started expanding their military capacities up to 200,000 munitions, and then finally, on October 8th, started attacking. And then when Israel responded with that pager attack, why did they do that? Why did they do that? Because the commanders, the leaders of Hezbollah had a plan to attack northern Galilee and do a second October 7th, kidnap hostages with a ground invasion. Now, you tell me, what should Israel do?
Okay.
Well,
De-escalation through escalation.
Okay, hang on. I'll go to Aaron.
It's always easier for them to blame Israel.
I think a good thing would be to not argue with her. I don't know if that guy, if the guy on the right shaking his head, I don't know if the mouse on that, what do they call those things? Yeah, the weather wheel. Yeah, the hamster wheel was getting a little bit off track and kind of banging against the inside of his head in the space up there. I don't know. But I thought that was a very, very good, succinct point. Boy, if you ever get on those programs, get to the point. Because you only got a couple minutes, and whether you like Piers or not, he's an idiot on some things. He did give her the time to say that. And this is a very big deal. And finally, I just will say is, pray for the people of North Carolina. This is Asheville, sort of in the center, and you see all the closed roads and everything. And I think we're not fully aware yet of the magnitude of the death, damage, and destruction. And I will say, I think it's very safe to say that the federal government response to this has been absolutely atrocious. And I don't see the media covering it, and I think the media is not covering it because they're covering it up to protect the government and the election and all that stuff. So this is by the way, I did dig into the website. You can go to the CNN has good results from the last time. So the blue county on the left there of North Carolina, that's Asheville. It's a blue county. Went 2-1 for Biden in the last administration or the last election in 2020. And so some people are saying, well, all this would happen because they wanted to change the election results. In North Carolina, it was very close. It was only, Trump had 2,758,000 and Biden had 2,684,000. So what's that, 58-16, 74,000 votes. I don't know if there's enough in the red counties to alter that. I don't know. Just pay attention. And I would say if the Republicans want to make sure that people vote, they need to get in there with absentee ballots and have a ground operation and take care of it. It's clear they have 30 days to do that. I got way more. It's time to quit. So listen, pray for Israel. It's a very difficult situation that they face. And I do stand with Israel. I cannot believe that people support these terrorists that did that. You heard what Elika Laban said. You heard what Nadav Yael said on the Call Me Back podcast. If you listen to that whole podcast, they will say, listen, they wanted to do their plan, whatever happened in Gaza border area, they wanted to do that times 1,000. So they didn't want 1,000 dead or 1,200 dead. They wanted 1 million dead. They didn't want 300 hostages. They wanted 3,000 or 30,000 hostages. They were preparing for that, but somehow Nasrallah, who always wanted to blind Israel, was himself blinded, praise the Lord, and didn't do it. And I think there is a supernatural thing going on here. You will work very, very hard to do that. So, J.B. Hickson here Tuesday night at 7 p.m., a week from Tuesday, 7 p.m. online. Both will be live streamed. Prophecy Roundtable with Patrick Woodbridge Gillette and Scott Townsend. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the privilege of living at this time where we can see all of these things unfold. Lord, give us strength, give us courage, and give us understanding and wisdom so that we can understand the times in which we live and stand as holy, righteous people in an evil day. Bless us this week. Give us opportunities to share the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen.